Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. FPL Consult here, and yes, we are back with the preseason content for the 22-23 season. So I'm so happy to be back making content for you guys. It took a while to release this video because I still was improving some of the effects that you will see later on in this video, and I was still working out some things to come with the channel, and slowly you guys will see I'm rolling out some new and exciting things for the channel. So I'm really excited for you guys to have a look at what's in store for this channel. But for now, in today's video, we are going to talk about my Game Week 1 first draft. Right, and before we begin, of course, if you are new around here and you are not subscribed yet, please help me out and subscribe. It means a lot to the channel and it really helps it out massively. Right, so appreciate if you guys could do that for me. And also, if you do enjoy this video, please do consider leaving a like as well. Right, so let's get on with this video. And as always, before I reveal my draft, I always like to contextualize how I've made my decisions, right? So here we're going to talk about some early thoughts first before going into the draft, right? So the first thing that I want to talk about is that there are now a few rule changes within the Premier League game and also within FPL itself, right? So for the rule changes within FPL, there now are unlimited transfers allowed between game week 16 and game week 17, and this is because of the World Cup. So what this essentially means is that the unlimited transfers between game week 16 and game week 17 functions as if it's a third wildcard that we are forced to use, right? You can be sure that everyone would use this third wildcard, right? So in essence, the first wildcard still has to be used before game week 16, right? So because this is the case, we are kind of forced to use our first wildcard latest around game week 8 to game week 12 so that we still have time to maximize that first wildcard for the remaining few game weeks before game week 16 hits. Right, so this is something to think about, because if we are kind of forced to use our first wildcard around game week 8 to 12, then our first draft technically would just have to be sufficient for the first 8 game weeks, right? And that can affect how we select our players in our draft as well. Right, so now let's move on to the rule changes within the Premier League itself, and that is that 5 substitutions are now allowed for all Premier League games, right? So what this essentially means is that there is greater rotation risk among all the teams, right? You can be sure that even though Pep Roulette still stands, all the other teams now are kind of subject to this Pep Roulette as well, where all the other managers would definitely want to rotate their players and give them as much rest as they can if some of the games are already secured, right? So how does this impact our FPL decisions, right? So we are definitely going to have to pick the absolute essentials going forward, because with 5 substitutions allowed, players who are guaranteed 90 minutes in the 21-22 season may no longer be guaranteed 90 minutes in the 22-23 season, right? So we do have to take note of this, and this can impact the players we choose in our first draft as well. Right, so now let's take a look at some fixtures and analyze them to see which kind of teams we can pick out to target their players and some teams that we should avoid. So taking a look at these 5 teams here on the screen right now, I think these 5 teams are pretty much the teams that all of us are targeting right now, and they have the best fixtures of all the other teams in the Premier League, right? So let's take a look, and I've ranked them in order of how I feel their fixtures fare, right? So I do think that Arsenal does have the best opening fixtures of the 22-23 season, right? They only play Manchester United in game week 6, and for the rest of their first 8 fixtures, they're all pretty much decent fixtures where Arsenal can really perform, right? And then if we take a look, Manchester City, of course, they do have some games against West Ham and Tottenham, etc., but they are still Manchester City, and we do still expect them to wipe their opponents away in the first 8 game weeks, right? And then if we take at Liverpool, they do have a pretty decent run as well, right? If we take a look, they're Fulham in game week 1, Crystal Palace in game week 2, and then they play Manchester United, followed by a good run of 4 fixtures, and then game week 8 they play Chelsea, right? So there's every chance that they could play quite well against Manchester United in game week 3 as well, right? So if you take a look on the whole, Liverpool does have a really good run as well. And then if we take a look at Chelsea, very decent fixtures all the way up to game week 8 where they play Liverpool at home. Right, so lastly, let's take a look at Tottenham. And as we can see, Tottenham, I've ranked them rank them kind of the lowest out of these 5 teams, and that's because they play Chelsea in game week 2, they play Manchester City in game week 7, and they also play West Ham in game week 5, right, which could be a difficult fixture away, right? So if you take a look on the whole, Tottenham still is a strong team, and players like Kane and Son might interest us as well, right? And they ended off the season really well, as we can remember, qualifying for the Champions League as well, so that can give them a boost to start off this season well as well. Right, so on the whole, Tottenham players not to be ignored as well. So if you take a look at these 5 teams on the whole, I do think that we should be targeting players from all these teams. But of course, we can't target all their good players, right? We do have to pick out some essentials from them. And later on in the draft, I will mention some of the essentials that I do feel we must pick, and others that are slightly more risky, but we can consider to punt on them. So now let's take a look at some teams to avoid, and I'm not going to mention the newly 3 promoted teams, and that's because we all know the 3 promoted teams have really poor fixtures, right? So I don't think any of us would be targeting any players from the newly promoted teams, but I want to mention more about the teams who were in the Premier League already, and this season they do have a pretty tough run of fixtures in the first 8 game weeks, right? So they are Manchester United, West Ham, Leicester City, Southampton, and Crystal Palace. I do think that all of these teams are avoids for the first, at least our first draft, right? So if you take a look at Manchester United, they play Brighton at home, Brentford away. Both are kind of tougher fixtures because Brighton and Brentford are quite strong defensively, right? And then if you look after that, they have Liverpool in game week 3, they have Leicester in game week 5, and they have Arsenal in game week 6, right? So all of these are tougher fixtures for them, right? So Manchester United is probably a team I would avoid. It's worth noting as well that Ronaldo is currently not showing up for training, and he is also seeking a move elsewhere, so let's keep a lookout for that as well. Right, so West Ham, on the other hand, they start the season off with a really tough fixture against Manchester City, and then in game week 5 and 6, they do have tougher fixtures against Tottenham and Chelsea, and then in game week 7, they have Newcastle, which is an up-and-coming team that we know, right? So on the whole, first 8 game weeks, West Ham do have quite a tough run, right? And then if you take a look at Leicester, similar situation there, Arsenal in game week 2, Chelsea in game week 4, Tottenham in game week 8. Right, and if you take a look at Southampton, it just gets worse, right? Tottenham in game week 1, Leicester in game week 3, Manchester United game week 4, Chelsea game week 5, right? So Southampton is also a team to stay away from. And lastly, Crystal Palace have Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester City, and Man U all in the first 8 game weeks. So that is kind of a red flag right there, and these are all teams that we should avoid. So guys, before we get on with the video, I just want to give a massive shout out to SoRare who's sponsoring today's video. SoRare is one of the fastest growing fantasy football platforms in the world. It basically combines fantasy football with trading cards, so you can think of it as a mix of FPL, FIFA, and Football Manager. Every week you get to build up the best team, set your captain, and when that team performs well in real life, you win prizes like real money or valuable trading cards, which you can keep to build a stronger team or trade on the marketplace. They're basically non-fungible tokens, and you can sell them on the market to turn a profit. I've started playing for a while now, and I've got to say guys, it's really cool and exciting to play this alongside FPL, especially since it is so similar. So if this sounds like something you'd be interested in, and if you want to support the channel, click the first link in the description to sign up for an account and get a free valuable card worth about up to 50 euros after 5 card purchases. If you guys do sign up, let me know down in the comments below what you think of the game. I really enjoy it, and I hope you guys do too. So before we take a look at the draft proper, let's take a look at some players that I think are essentials, some enablers, and also some players to avoid. Right, so I've put in the essentials portion Salah, Trent, and James, as well as an £8.0 million midfielder. Now, Salah, Trent, and James, I do feel they all are essentials in every game week 1 draft. Now, Salah and Trent is probably less of a debate, but for James, I do feel like James is a little bit better than Chilwell, just because Chilwell has just come back from an injury that kept him out of majority of the last season. So even though he did play really well, and he probably is still the first choice left back for Chelsea, or left wing back, should I say, right, I still do feel like James is the better option because he has been playing, right, after he recovered from an injury later on in the previous season. He did play a good portion of games, and he probably will start the season quite well, right? So that's why I prefer James over Chilwell. And if we take a look at the midfield placeholder there with an 8.0 mil price tag, I've put it there because I've taken a look at the players around the 8 mil bracket, and I do feel like a lot of the players there, players like Mason Mount, players like Madison, Luis Diaz, Saka, they all have a really good value, right? And that's why probably FPL priced them at 8.0 mil as well. But the key in having a player in our team that is 8.0 mil is that we are able to just swap out when the fixtures for other 8.0 mil midfielders get better, right? We can just swap out. Let's say Mason Mount is in form, we can just do a one transfer and just save taking a hit, right? So that's why that 8.0 mil price point is important for us to have in our teams as well, right? And if you take a look at the enablers, there's Andreas, who is Andreas Pereira, of course, right? Who is 4.5 mil. He currently is still listed as a Manchester United player, but we now know he has signed for Fulham, and he's probably going to be quite an attacking midfielder, right? That is his position naturally, at least in Manchester United as well, right? So he did really, really well in the Brazilian league as well last season. So he is probably a player that can really enable our team to have money elsewhere, right? He is just 4.5 mil, so a really good enabler in the midfield, right? And same goes for Colbeck, who is 4.5 mil as well, right? A really good option there, and also a starter. And then there is Neco Williams, of course, who is currently signed for Nottingham Forest, 4.0 mil. He is still listed as a Liverpool player, but we know he had a really good season with Fulham last season, and then now he has signed for Nottingham Forest and is probably going to play really attacking. We know his style, right? And he's probably going to be straight into the first team of Forest as well, right? So these three players present really good value for the price that we are paying for them. Right, so now let's take a look at some avoids, right? And this portion I think is important, and that's because these players are players that most of us had in our teams in the previous season, but this season they are no longer good options, right? So the first player to avoid, I've put Ronaldo at 10.5 mil, and that's because not only is he, his mind is not currently with the club, he may not have a good preseason, but on top of this, Manchester United do have a really poor run of fixtures, as we mentioned just now, right? So that's why Ronaldo, I do feel, is an avoid. Madison as well at 8.0 mil. We talked about how Leicester have a poor starting 8 game weeks, and same goes for Zaha as well, right? So if we take a look in Nketiah, his price has risen quite significantly to 7.0 mil, and it is no longer an attractive price for us, right? Because last season he was at 5.5 mil, and this season his price has risen, and there are better options like Gabriel Jesus, who probably is going to be the starting striker for Arsenal, right? So, and he is just 8.0 mil, which is 1 mil more than Nketiah. So if we want to go for Nketiah, I'd rather just go for Jesus instead, right? And then if you take a look at Gallagher, 7.0 mil, he no longer is in Crystal Palace. He now is in Chelsea, right? So he's no longer that good of an option, right? And then if you take a look at Cody as well, 5.0 mil, he's no longer at the 4.5 mil nailed Wolves defender that we had last season, right? Of course, he is still nailed, but he is now 5.0 mil, and there are a lot of better options at 5 mil in the defensive bracket, right? And lastly, let's take a look at Nick Pope. He is 5.0 mil, and he plays for Newcastle, right? So a lot of us are intending to target Pope because we do think that he is a good keeper. Newcastle are a pretty decent team. But if you want to go for Pope, I'd rather we go for Mendy, because Mendy is also 5.0 mil, and Chelsea are definitely the proven defensively better team, right? And then if you take a look at the last option there for the avoid section, there is Reguilon at 4.5 mil, right? He is no longer going to be a starter. At least this is what most of us predict, right? And Perisic is going to be the number one left wing back, right? So probably we are going to see Perisic play much more than Reguilon, and that's why I would avoid Reguilon instead, right? So let's take a look at our first draft, how it's shaping up after considering all these players. Right, guys, so this is my first draft, and before we get into the players, I just want to talk about my squad value first. So it is 99.5 mil, and I've left 0.5 in the bank, and that's because I do want to be able to afford players when they rise in price when the game starts, right? Of course, these prices are locked currently, but once game week 1 starts, player prices may change, and I don't want to be priced out of certain players that I want to go for, right? So keeping 0.5 in the bank just allows me that flexibility, right? And even so, with just my squad value of 99.5 mil, I do think this is a really strong team, right? So let's go ahead and get into the players. So I've gone for Sanchez at the back. 4.5 mil keeper. Initially it was Raya, but we now know that they have signed a new keeper, and there is some questions as to whether Raya would keep his spot or not. So Sanchez goes into the goal for now. 4.5 mil, and Brighton do have a really strong set of fixtures where they can keep some clean sheets in the first 8 game weeks as well. Right, and if you take a look, I've kind of gone big at the back, right? I have Trent, Tomiyasu, Cancelo, James, and Perisic. Right, so the reason I've gone for Trent alone and not Robertson as well is because I want to save the other 2 Liverpool spots for the midfield, which I'll talk about later on. Right, so Trent, Cancelo, and James are pretty much nailed in my team. So it's just Tomiyasu and Perisic who are the newcomers. Right, so Tomiyasu at 4.5 mil, I do think that he is a really, really cheap option into the Arsenal defense, who do have a good run of first 8 game week fixtures. Right, and then if you take a look at Perisic as well, 5.5 mil, we know he has been really, really attacking at Inter. He plays left wing back, lots of assists as well, a lot of potential for clean sheets and assist points there, so Perisic makes our team as well. Right, and then if you take a look, there's Salah, Diaz, and Neto in midfield. Right, so Salah, nothing much to say, he is an essential. So the reason I've gone for Diaz as that 8.0 million midfield spot right now is because after considering all the other players there, I do think like Diaz is the one with the biggest potential to haul. Right, of course I can go for Saka as well, right, but I already have Jesus up front, as you can see, right, so that's why I've gone for Diaz in midfield. Right, and then we have the 5.5 million option of Neto. I do think he's a really good enabler. 5.5 mil is actually a really cheap price point for Neto, who does have a good run of fixtures as well. Right, and then up front we have Jesus and Haaland. Right, so Jesus has started the preseason really well with Arsenal, right, straight in, and after 90 seconds he's already scored a couple of goals. Right, so really, really promising start for Jesus as well, and if he can bring that into the Premier League season, that would be really, really great. Right, and then we have Haaland at 11.5 mil. So there is kind of a debate whether we should go for Kane or whether we should go for Haaland, right? And some people are thinking of going for Kane first in game week 1 and then swapping over to Haaland in game week 2. Now, I personally don't like that because I wouldn't want to book in my transfer so early on, just in game week 1 already, right? So I want to have that flexibility. So I've gone for Haaland now because after looking at all the Kane versus Haaland debates, which I would put out a video later on as one of the preseason content videos, but if you take a look at Haaland, just based on his statistics and all the support he's getting, I do think like Haaland would really haul, and I will go on to elaborate this further in the videos later on in the season, but I do feel like Haaland is currently a better option than Kane, right? And if I was gonna go for maybe a Spurs asset, I would probably go for Son instead of Kane, right? So those of you who are thinking Kane or Haaland, that is a tough decision, but for me, I'm going for Haaland as of now. Right, and then if you take a look at the bench, I have a 4.0 mil bench fodder as a keeper, right? And then there's Undav, who is 5.5 mil and probably just the only best striking option there is in the 5.5 mil bracket for strikers, right? He did really, really well in the Belgium League last season. He's probably going to start for Brighton as well, right? So let's hope he gives us a good option on the bench as well. And if I do want to bring in Undav for Neto, let's say, when Neto doesn't have a good fixture in the first 8 game weeks, right, Undav could present a really good option as well. All right, and then we have Andreas and Callback, which, as mentioned just now earlier on, they are really good enablers, so 4.5 mil each, and they are both starters as well, right? So if we need to call on these bench players, then definitely they can just come on for us, right? So if you take a look on the whole, this Game Week 1 team is really, really strong, right? I could make some changes later on, and I will release more updated drafts, but for now, this is how my team is looking. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and also do let me know what you guys think of this draft, right? What are the changes you would make, how your draft is looking like. Are you going for Kane? Are you going for Haaland? Right, let me know in the comments below. There's plenty of preseason content coming your way, of course. So if you guys aren't subscribed already, please help me out and click that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out. And yeah, I'll see you guys in another preseason video very soon. Bye-bye.